Security breach in Quadrant 7. 4 words whispered through Sergeant Ashford's earpiece that weren't supposed to be there. No such quadrant existed in the palace security grid. It was code for the unthinkable. Traitors within the Royal Guard. Ashford's heartbeat accelerated to match the silent countdown now underway. The royal family had exactly 17 minutes before the palace would fall. Each passing second thundered in his ears like artillery fire, marking the diminishing window for action. What happened in those precious minutes would become the most classified security incident in modern monarchy history, and the reason why every royal security protocol worldwide was rewritten afterward. The fate of a dynasty hung in the balance. If you're enjoying this intense story, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more epic Royal Guard tales. You won't want to miss what happens next. What does a perfect security system look like? For Sergeant William Ashford, it was the culmination of 15 years of service to the Crown. Biometric scanners at every entrance, AI-powered surveillance monitoring all 342 rooms, and a team of elite guards he personally trained. The morning sun barely crept above the palace walls as Ashford began his day. He moved through system diagnostics with methodical precision, the soft blue glow of monitors illuminating his focused expression. The palace slept while he worked. As dawn broke, he stood before his team for the personnel briefing, his voice steady as he assigned positions and reviewed protocols. The guards stood at attention, a testament to his leadership, each one handpicked and molded into what Ashford considered the perfect defender of the crown. His walkthrough of the East Wing followed the same path it had for years. Before the royal family emerged for breakfast, Ashford inspected every corner, every shadow. To him, the security grid represented more than wires and code. It was his legacy etched into the very stones of the ancient palace. Sometimes during these quiet moments, he would pause to rest his hand against a wall, feeling the cool stone beneath his palm. These walls have stood for centuries, he often thought, and my systems will ensure they stand for centuries more. Tuesday morning brought the first ripple in the perfect system. Ashford noticed it immediately. A 3-second delay in the camera feed from the royal study, followed later by a sensor in the north corridor registering an unexpected temperature drop. The AI flagged both as minor technical glitches, nothing worth escalating. Yet beneath the routine, a shadow was gathering in the guise of trust. Head of Security. Adrian Vale reviewed the report later that morning, his charismatic smile instantly putting Ashford at ease. The new software update must have caused it. I'll have tech take a look. Vale's hand rested briefly on Ashford's shoulder. You worry too much, old friend. Ashford nodded, trusting the man who had become his right hand over the years. The palace continued its daily rhythm. Queen Elizabeth moved through the West Wing to her charity meeting, while the king settled into the throne room for his private council. Every 2 hours, guards rotated positions, fresh eyes taking over surveillance. That afternoon, Vale's team moved through the palace with equipment and tablets. Guards watched curiously as technicians installed what Vale called a security patch. Just routine maintenance, he explained with confidence. We're strengthening our defenses against external threats. The guards nodded, completely trusting their leader. How does a trusted head of security become the monarchy's greatest threat? Over 3 years, Vale had carefully built his reputation within the palace walls, becoming indispensable while quietly creating backdoors in the security system, vulnerabilities that would later become gaping wounds in the palace's defense. Ashford had noticed Vale spending additional time with newer recruits stationed near critical areas. He interpreted it as thorough leadership rather than Vale identifying which guards might be turned against the crown when the moment came. The day before the attack, Vale personally inspected all communication systems throughout the palace, confirming the placement of signal jammers that would cripple communications when activated. That evening, Ashford reviewed the day's reports. Everything seemed normal, yet something nagged at him, a feeling he couldn't quite place. Perhaps it was Vale's increased time in the server room, or how certain security protocols had been streamlined without consultation. The perfect system still functioned flawlessly on the surface, but beneath it, invisible currents were shifting. Those invisible currents shifting beneath the surface would soon reveal themselves as deliberate ripples in the security fabric, each one carefully orchestrated by someone who knew exactly where the blind spots were. As the days passed, the anomalies began to form a pattern that only a veteran like Ashford could recognize. The palace's defenses weren't failing. They were being dismantled from within, piece by carefully calculated piece. The motion sensors in the eastern corridor triggered 4 times during the midnight shift, between 2:17 and 2:34 a.m., when guard coverage was thinnest. Ashford dismissed the first incident as a system hiccup, the second as coincidence. By the fourth, suspicion formed. When maintenance blamed aging wiring, he nodded politely but made a private note in his logbook. Then came the anomaly in the duty roster. Ashford noticed guard rotations had shifted dramatically. Rookies barely past probation now guarded the inner sanctum, while veterans patrolled the less sensitive perimeter. Vale's explanation, the younger guards need experience in all areas, sounded reasonable, but the timing troubled him. After 15 years securing the palace, Ashford had developed an instinct for when something wasn't right. This felt wrong. A standard security drill revealed more problems. For 37 seconds, east and west command posts lost communication, potentially catastrophic in a real emergency. Vale dismissed it as equipment fatigue, ordering replacement radios that arrived with suspicious speed. Ashford tested one after hours and discovered a slight delay on certain frequencies, as if signals were being intercepted and rerouted. Evidence continued mounting. A palace maid reported unfamiliar guards in the archive room. Security logs showed authorized personnel, but timestamps were offset by 3 minutes from her account, a discrepancy small enough to miss unless specifically sought. A more alarming development followed. Vale announced a reduction in the royal family's security detail, citing budget constraints. Ashford, who had helped prepare the budget himself, knew it hadn't changed in 3 years. The warning signs accumulated rapidly. Unauthorized access attempts increased 15% in a month. Security cameras went offline during key diplomatic meetings. Guards reported unexplained equipment malfunctions at specific checkpoints. 1 week before the planned coup, Ashford discovered something truly disturbing. Emergency response protocols had been updated without his authorization. The new procedures routed all crisis communications through Vale's office before reaching command center or royal family, creating a delay that could prove fatal. More suspicious timing emerged. The palace's backup generator was scheduled for routine maintenance during the king's private council meeting. A power failure would leave the council chamber vulnerable while emergency systems engaged. The final piece fell into place when Ashford accessed system logs and found palace schematics had been viewed 17 times in the previous month, all from Vale's terminal, all during off hours. The schematics included emergency routes, panic room locations, and the underground evacuation tunnel system. That evening, Ashford decided to confront Vale directly the next morning. He couldn't take suspicions to the royal family without concrete evidence, but couldn't ignore the accumulating red flags. He drafted notes, listing each anomaly and its significance. His military training had taught him to trust his instincts, and every instinct was now screaming that something catastrophic approached. Years of serving the palace had honed his perception, something Vale had clearly underestimated. The window between suspicion and confirmation slammed shut at 1400 hours. As security screens throughout the command center blinked out like dying embers, Ashford felt his stomach drop. The confrontation with Vale he'd planned for the morning would never happen. His instincts had been right, but tragically late. The primary security grid collapsed. Access panels throughout the palace flashed urgent red warnings before going completely dark, as if the building itself was bleeding out. Vale's meticulous sabotage had turned each fail-safe mechanism into another dead end. Ashford reached for his radio with practiced efficiency, only to hear the hiss of dead air. "Communications are down," he announced to the room of increasingly alarmed faces. His voice remained steady as years of contingency training took over. Implement Protocol Shadowfall. The words felt strange in his mouth, a procedure designed for catastrophic failure that they routinely practiced but never truly believed they'd use. The shift to analog operations was immediate but jarring, as if the future was suddenly swallowed by the past. Guards accustomed to electronic convenience now fumbled with mechanical locks and physical keys. Hand signals replaced radio chatter as teams moved through corridors that suddenly felt foreign without the comforting hum of technology. The palace, a marvel of modern security moments before, had transformed into a 19th-century fortress with 21st-century vulnerabilities. Confusion blossomed in the vacuum left by digital silence. Guards reported contradicting orders from different command nodes. Some were told to hold position, others to converge on the royal chambers, creating dangerous uncertainty. Ashford realized Vale had seeded misinformation into their ranks, fracturing their response before the attack had even begun. The command center doors burst open as Captain Elise Howard stumbled in, her usually immaculate uniform askew. Blood trickled from a cut above her eye. "The King's guards have been incapacitated," she reported between labored breaths. "Some kind of gas in the ventilation system." She steadied herself against a console before delivering the final blow. "And Vale is missing." Ashford's mind raced through the palace's blueprints, not the digital schematics Vale had been studying, but the original paper layouts he'd memorized years ago. "Captain, we need to seal the royal quarters immediately." He turned to the remaining officers. "Manual overrides on all security checkpoints. Iron gates down, reinforced doors sealed." The manual override systems, architectural relics from a more paranoid era, had remained untouched for decades. Massive iron gates designed to compartmentalize the palace groaned to life as guards cranked ancient mechanisms. The sound of steel bars sliding into place echoed through marble hallways, creating a medieval defense against a modern coup. The palace transformed into a labyrinth of shadows and whispers. Guards now eyed each other with suspicion. Anyone could be part of Vale's conspiracy. They abandoned electronic communications entirely, relying on prearranged visual signals and code phrases. "We can't trust any electronic system," Howard said, wiping blood from her brow. "Vale's had months to plant his people and compromise our equipment." She and Ashford huddled over a paper map, marking positions with a pencil as they divided their remaining loyal personnel. "3 teams," Ashford directed, tracing routes on the yellowed paper. "Team 1 secures the royal family. Team 2 restores basic communications. Team 3 neutralizes hostiles." At precisely 14:17 hours, gunfire erupted from the East Wing. Ashford led his team toward the royal apartments. As they crossed an interior courtyard, he spotted Vale in a window opposite, surrounded by guards wearing black armbands marking them as part of the coup. Across the distance, their eyes met. Vale nodded once, a gesture acknowledging that the deadly chess match between 2 security masters had begun. That single nod exchanged between Vale and Ashford transformed the palace's panic room from sanctuary to death trap. Designed to withstand artillery fire, the fortified chamber with its 3-foot-thick walls and independent oxygen supply should have protected the royal family for days. Instead, with Vale knowing every entry code and emergency protocol, their safety margin had evaporated to mere minutes. Captain Elise Howard sprinted through the smoke-filled corridors, her training overriding the chaos erupting around her. Reaching the royal quarters before Vale's men, she found the king and queen already alert to the danger, their faces tense but composed. "Your Majesties, we've been compromised," Howard announced firmly over the distant gunfire. "Vale has turned against us. We must reach the secondary location now." The king nodded grimly, understanding their dire situation. Meanwhile, Ashford positioned his most trusted guards at strategic choke points throughout the palace. These loyal defenders, veterans and carefully vetted recruits alike, understood the nature of their assignment. They were buying time with their lives. "Hold this position for 5 minutes, then fall back to checkpoint 3, Ashford instructed a young lieutenant. The woman's hand remained steady on her weapon, silently accepting the sacrifice being asked of her. The rebels' assault displayed terrifying efficiency. Vale had weaponized the palace's security infrastructure against its defenders. Thermal imaging revealed guard positions. Security doors swung open before the attackers. From Central Command, Ashford watched with growing horror as the palace's defense grid betrayed them. Security cameras showed loyal guards being overwhelmed as the attackers moved with military precision. "Sir, they've reached the West Wing. They'll be at the panic room in 3 minutes," reported a communications officer. Ashford allowed himself the briefest smile. Let them come. While Vale had mastered digital blueprints and modern protocols, he'd overlooked something fundamental. The palace's oldest secrets existed in no database. Behind the ornate paneling of the Queen's private study, a narrow passage led downward, part of a network constructed centuries before electronic surveillance. The Queen complicated matters with her characteristic compassion. "I will not leave my staff behind," she insisted, as Howard urged her toward the hidden entrance. "They are as much targets as we are." Ashford, arriving amid falling plaster and thickening smoke, faced an impossible choice: follow protocol or include civilians in their escape. Meeting the Queen's determined gaze, he made his decision. "Everyone comes, single file, absolute silence," he ordered, knowing the additional people would slow their progress dramatically. While the royal party descended into long unused passages, Vale's forces converged on the empty panic room. Their commander's face contorted with rage as he realized his plan's fatal flaw. "Find them!" he shouted, his professional facade cracking. "They're using the old ways!" The battle intensified as loyal guards fought a desperate delaying action. They transformed opulent halls into a methodical battlefield, each position held just long enough to create confusion about the royal family's location. The pristine corridors filled with acrid smoke and gunfire as ancient stone walls absorbed modern bullets. Ashford led the group through a servant's passage behind the kitchens. His flashlight beam cut through thick dust, revealing cobwebs and forgotten history as they moved deeper into the tunnel network. The sounds of combat faded as they descended further beneath the palace grounds. At the entrance to the Cold War-era bunker system, Ashford made his final calculation. The tunnel ahead led to safety, but someone would need to ensure no one followed. He turned to Captain Howard, pressing his security key firmly into her palm. "Get them to the bunker," he said quietly. "I'll make sure no one follows." Ashford's command to Howard lingered in the corridor as he turned away from the royal escape route. In that moment, he transformed from protector to decoy, knowing the palace security hub would become his coffin. He moved with military precision through the darkened hallways, silently calculating how many minutes the royal family needed to reach safety and exactly how much time he could buy them. 4 guards fell in step behind him, their faces bearing the grim acceptance of men who understood their final mission. As they fortified the security hub's entrance, Ashford revealed nothing of his emotions, only the mechanical movements of a soldier preparing for battle. "Barricade everything," Ashford ordered, his voice steady despite the weight of what was coming. The guards transformed the security hub into a fortress, dragging heavy equipment to block the main entrance. Each placement felt like setting stones in his own mausoleum, yet Ashford found comfort in the systematic defense, a final act of order against coming chaos. Davies, the youngest guard, checked their ammunition. "Sir, we have 3 magazines each." Ashford nodded. "It'll be enough." The necessary lie hung between them like a shield. Through fragmented monitor views, Ashford watched rebel forces converging. Inside, he felt a strange calm, the same stillness he'd experienced before every critical mission of his career. This would be his last stand, but it would mean the monarchy's survival. Vale's voice crackled through the emergency channel. "William, this is unnecessary. The monarchy is obsolete. Join us, and you'll have a place in what comes after." Ashford ignored him. Every second Vale waited for response was another second the royal family moved toward safety. Silence became his weapon as he activated lockdown protocols, forcing steel doors throughout the palace to compartmentalize Vale's forces. "They're coming," announced Peterson from his position. "3 directions, sir." The assault came with surgical precision. Vale's men moved in coordinated strikes, their superior numbers quickly telling. Davies fell with a shot to the throat, Martinez with 3 rounds to the chest. Between bursts of gunfire, Ashford initiated a complete system purge, erasing any data that could track the royal family. "Outer perimeter breached!" Peterson shouted as the barricade began failing. Ashford and his 2 remaining guards retreated to the inner office. Through security monitors, he spotted Vale leading the next wave. Decades of friendship reduced to this brutal confrontation. Collins, the 3rd guard, died throwing himself on a grenade. His sacrifice bought precious seconds as Peterson and Ashford retreated further. "You're dying for nothing, William," Vale shouted over the gunfire. "The monarchy has failed this country. We're building something better." Ashford's response came in action, triggering an emergency bulkhead that separated Vale from half his assault team. Peterson took a bullet to the shoulder but continued firing. "How much longer, sir?" he asked, blood soaking his uniform. "Just a few more minutes," Ashford replied, checking his watch. The royal family would be nearing the underground vehicle bay now. With determined movements, he accessed the final protocol Vale never knew existed. "System purge complete," announced the computer as Ashford initiated the hub's self-destruct sequence, a targeted electromagnetic pulse that would render Vale's technological advantages useless. The pulse would flow through the systems like a final heartbeat before darkness, buying the monarchy critical time to escape and regroup. Peterson fell as the final assault began. Ashford stood alone, service pistol in hand, as Vale's men breached the inner office. He fired methodically until his ammunition counter reached 0, just as Vale himself stepped over the bodies of his fallen men. History remembers what we allow it to. 3 months after the bloodshed, palace press releases described a swift response to foreign terrorists, with headlines celebrating the Royal Guard's unwavering loyalty. Memorial services honored the fallen without mentioning the betrayal from within. Intelligence officers discovered Vale's transformation had roots years earlier. Before his royal appointment, he formed connections with radical groups advocating monarchy's dissolution. His journals revealed a man who saw himself as revolutionary. "Sometimes stability requires selective truth," the Queen told her advisors when preserving the official narrative. Words that crystallize the moral compromise at the heart of statecraft, where loyalty's facade conceals betrayal's shadow.